I got up there, at first we were sitting in the back, just all the brothers of the prayer line. And it just happened. I don't think we intentionally did it, but we just all in the back of the room. And then when I went up and I was on stage, I'm looking and all of the brothers from the line were just in the back. And it kind of felt like the prayer line was insulating the rest of the room. Like what most people don't know is that I actually had a speech impediment. So I didn't speak. I didn't really speak until I was about in the first grade, maybe like kindergarten, first grade. I remember, so even before I got there, I was about 9 or 10. So my parents split at 3. When I was 9 or 10, my older brother gets killed by police. And then at that point, it clicked that kids can get hurt and kids can get killed, and like the world is not kind to children.
This is exciting, man. We got my boy, Dewane Mutunga, the GOAT.
Yes, sir.
The Mindset King.
Yes, sir.
Listen, man, this is special to me in so many ways. It's a Boy Man King podcast, man. Shout out to my boy Chizzy. But this is something special because we're celebrating the prayer line. We're celebrating King Kong. We're celebrating individual growth and success.
Yeah.
We're at the crib. It's my 40th birthday. We got fellas in the room. Shout out to Kev. Shout out to Derek. Shout out to Julian. Shout out to Jake, man. It's just, I feel like this is a great culmination because of the journey me and you had been on for years. You kind of highlighted that at the conference, man. I kind of want to start there. I know we want to get into traditional stuff.
Yeah.
But, I was intentional who I wanted to speak, and me and you now, it's like almost 10 years. It's crazy when I hear you tell the story. Yeah. You forget how much years have grown by, but I remember when you was that youngin' in your 20s, struggling with your girl, trying to figure out what you're gonna do in life, but you heard the substance. I heard the intellect, even from then. And then my heart went to you in 17 when I got the depth of the story when we was in the cabin. And so talk about just that King Kong experience for you, like with not just doing it, but who was in the room.
Yeah, so it is crazy when you look in hindsight at just how much life we've done together.
Yeah.
And whether you look at 10 years as a long time or not in the grand scheme of things, but when I got up there, at first we were sitting in the back, just all the brothers of the prayer line, and it just happened. I don't think we intentionally did it, but we just all in the back of the room. And then when I went up and I was on stage, and the Holy Spirit just hit me, and I'm looking and all of the brothers from the line were just in the back. And it kind of felt like the prayer line was insulating the rest of the room. Like it was just like, and I'm watching, I'm like, wow, all of these men have stood for me, have been a stand for me, have covered me in some way. Because I'm like, I was telling people like, y'all see me now? This is me with polish on me. Like Crump see me when I came through. In the beginning, I was super raw, rough around the edges, and brothers was just like, all right, man, we gonna get you. Like, I don't know. But to be there and to be able to celebrate you and to be able to do something to give back to you because of all you've given to me, as a more seasoned brother, you live more life and just embracing me the way you did. You know what I'm saying? So I'm looking, I see Mason in the back, Shan in the back, my cousin John is in the back.
Crazy.
And for me, like he brought me to the line. So I was in the thick of just a really dark time being young. Right. Yeah. You got a family and you're trying to figure things out. You're trying to juggle being an individual. I'm trying to figure I'm Dewane, but like I'm trying to figure that out. Right. I'm somebody's father, I'm a husband, and trying to make all of these things work. And I laugh because like you grown, but you ain't really grown yet. You don't really know what it is to be a grown man in the fullness of that. Right. And my cousin, was like, yo man, we gonna go to this conference, just for men. And I'm like, well, what I want to sit around a bunch of dudes for? Like, what we talking about? And I actually had just met Jay. I met Jeremy probably like a month or so before I had got him the corporate gig. So I had met. He's like, yeah, Jeremy's on the prayer line with us. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. He's a good dude. And my cousin got, John got that smile. He like, bro, he's like, just come with me. And I remember coming down. Mason was doing the Nation Builders, and I remember I walked in and I stopped right at the threshold of the door, and I was like, something is in this room. Right. It's like a spirit in this room, and I don't know quite what it is, but I know that it's nurturing, and I need to like be a part of that.
Yeah. And it's infectious in that way, man.
Yeah,
I had a similar experience as well when I'm one of the newbies. I mean, 2 years. I guess some have been obviously shorter than me, but I definitely can relate to that walking into the cabin. And like, I don't know none of these guys, but for some reason I feel like this is going to be something that I'm going to latch on to and create that brotherhood with. And you just feel it when you walk into the space, man. Yeah, man. So I definitely correct.
It's a spirit. No, it's cool. It's a spirit. So I walked in and I'm kind of like, and you got to think, my cousin is one of the OGs on the line. So I'm not even realizing how much love is in the room just off the strength of the connection.
Sure.
So I'm seeing, there's Crump and Mason and Ty and there's so many people are there. And I'm just like, all right, let me, kind of get in where I fit in or just soak in the game. But when we got to the cabin, right, that's when it was a little bit more intimate. The cabin happened maybe like 2 or 3 years later. And I remember, you kind of came afterwards. Yeah. And I think something clicked. He's like, oh, this is John's cousin? Yeah. He's like, bro, come here. Like, I just need you to understand. Yeah. Like, your cousin saved me.
Right.
And I didn't understand, but I'm just like, oh, I'm John's little cousin. So I'm like, yeah. But that's where we kind of like clicked.
So tell that story, man. Tell that story a little bit, man.
I guess this is happening.
Yeah, tell that story, bro.
Because I was going to tell your prayer line story.
Go ahead. You go first.
but so at that time, it was only like 3 or 4 people on the line. So who used to hold it was E.T., Quest, and John. So I'm in Bermuda, and me and my wife were going through a rough patch, and this is like 2013, and money is getting tight. I got to get a supplemental job at the boys' home. Chopper going to school, but I had to sell the bike to her uncle, and so I'm catching the school bus, Clearwater Middle School bus. So I'm a grown man, and I can't afford to buy lunch, so I'm packing lunch. So I'm on a BlackBerry, the BlackBerry days, and I got my headset plugged up from my BlackBerry phone, listen to the prayer line. Got the phone on mute. And every day I'm just going, and guys start tapping off, and Quest started leaving, ET started leaving, and John's left on there. But I get dropped off at Clearwater Middle School. I have to walk with my lunch, and sometimes staff will pick me up. They'll see me walking to go to the elementary school to just be a para to a kid that just nobody don't want to deal with. The kid don't actually have he has challenges, but he's not a bad kid.
Right.
So the job I'm doing is no fulfillment there, right? I love working with kids, but I just got this one kid in 3rd grade that I'm babysitting.
It is what it is, yeah.
So I'm walking, and my wife, there's a coldness, there's an emptiness, there's a deadness in our marriage, in our home. I don't know what to do with it. I never experienced that. I'm challenged. So school would start at 8:30, and me and John would be talking to me as I'm walking. And so a couple of the days, I was walking to the school, and he was talking to me, encouraging me with my wife. And then I couldn't go into the school. At 8, the bell rang, and so I had went into the parking lot. How the school is, St. David's Primary is a beautiful school in St. David's, Bermuda. But the parking lot is on a hill that the cars, you can't see the school. So I went and sat on the grass by a car, and I was in there crying. And John was just helping me through, bro, you're going to be all right. This is going to get through it. And I just couldn't see it, bro. There's no love, there's no sex for months. I don't know where this is going, man. I tried everything. I did the love dare. I'm on the line, I'm reading books, it's nothing. And he was just a lifeline of when there's only 2 guys on the phone, but we was on the phone for an hour. So that was a season of the line where it wasn't a bunch of people, there wasn't a host, it was just guys who was tapping in the days they could tap in. It was one of those seasons on the line, right? And I was in a terrible season though. And he walked me through that, just being there. You know what I'm saying? Literally, I went to work late a couple of days, just trying to express, because sometimes you don't need a solution. Sometimes you just need to vent. Sometimes it just makes you got to get it out so that you can start processing whatever God is trying to get to process. But sometimes men don't have that healthy outlet to just express something, so you don't go do something really stupid, right? And so John was the guy that was actually there. And so when I see, so E.T. Save, like, reframed me, gave me a framework for marriage through the line of practical steps. John was giving me life as I was navigating that. So my dedication to the line has nothing to do with the line today.
Right.
It has everything to do with the line 2012, 2013.
Man, we can all share those prayer line stories, man. Again, I shared a little bit about this yesterday at the conference, how you introduced me to the prayer line. Well, I've been friends for a minute. I remember coming to Impact and seeing you every day with the earpiece, and I'm like, can I talk to him? And he's on the prayer line. And even in my mind, I'm like, and I knew he was on a prayer line because obviously we talked about it, but I never really tapped in because I was still trying to be a knucklehead. And I'm talking about, I'm over 40 years old. So we talk about age as it relates to maturity and just being stuck in your boy space. Like, age has little to do with growth and with development. You know what I'm saying? It's only I'm 45 years old when I come to my knees and I'm like, yo, I need to do something different. I'm bringing my son to school. I lose control. Like I said, I talked a little bit about this yesterday. I'm swinging off on my ex-wife. And I'm like, this is not who I want to be. This is not who I am. My children have witnessed this. Like, I'm like, this cannot work. I'm almost getting arrested in America. And for me, at the height of George Floyd and all these other things that's going through my head, I'm like, it's over for me. It's over for me. And that's when, I reached out. I was like, Crump, like, I need something. You introduced me to the prayer lines. And since then, the brotherhood, the love, it's amazing. Like I said, you have to really feel it and be in that space. And so yesterday, to your point, when you see the brothers in the room, that even though you may not you may not have a face, but you heard his voice, and you're like, yo, yes. And you're like, yo, I'm Che from Bermuda. Like, oh, yes. Yo, your storyline is amazing. So just to see all the brothers in the line just kind of gird you, and you're like, yo, these are guys that you rub shoulders with, and they hold you accountable, and like, they're just watching you come into your own. Right. So I can imagine that's what you felt when you're standing up there. You're seeing all the brothers in there that just was like, yo, when you were 17 years old, just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, no, these are brothers that were literally, I'm talking about stood in the gap. They literally let me walk on their backs and make, like, there were times I was getting on the line, and the line was just to, not so that I could play offense or be reactive or do anything, but just to stomach and ground myself to get through the day.
I know what that's like.
Like, that's the
we
lifeline.
all know what that's
but
like.
But that's
bro.
why we call it. That's why we call it lifeline. And then some people think, well, what's happening? Like, bro, I'm a man. Sometimes I just need something to make me just get through the day. Like, that's it, bro. It ain't even something deep all the time. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it was just it was that for me. Yeah. And so, Crump used to have his like cliche drink when he came on the line.
You want to do it? You're gonna do it?
No, I'm not doing that.
You're not doing it.
I'm not doing
Come on, man. Everybody wants to hear you do it, man.
You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? And so the voices, right? Yeah. So while we were driving down, I'm in New York City. It's a 15-hour drive. Right. So we drive down, and again, I only did this for my cousin. Like, I'm not driving 15 hours.
Yeah.
We drive down, and I'm listening to these voices, and then I get in the room, and I hear, so this is dude that was saying, but I don't have connection. Right. But when we go to the retreat, I've already been on the line for 2-3 years. Okay. Right? And so I remember, Shan walks in, and I heard the voice, and I was like, it was almost like. For me, it was, and I don't want, don't nobody act crazy with this parallel, but like, almost like when you hear the voice of God and it's like, it wakes you up. But these are brothers that have been pouring into me. Yes. So when I hear certain voices, I'm like,
and back then, nobody had like a real strong social media presence.
Nobody,
So you literally didn't have a face.
You just knew the voice.
You only knew the voice. So 50 people showed up to a cabin, and it was the first time we saw each other's face, but we didn't know the face. We just only knew the voice. So you're like, So everybody
we were learning each other off the voice. Like, we would hear somebody speak and be like, I know that voice. I know his story. Like, I know how he poured into me.
It was all of that. So now we got like, we hear a voice, here's a social media.
Yeah.
You kind of get a feel, but back then it was none of that.
It was none of that. So I remember seeing Crump, and for me it's the second time, but we didn't really get a chance to build.
Yeah.
So I'm like, hey, what's going on? And he just like it clicked. I'm like, yeah, I'm John Cousin. And I seen the shift in him, and I'm kind of like, what that's? And he's like, nah, bro, you feel me? Your cousin saved my life. And I didn't. And later on, he kind of shared his testimony with me. But me and Jake was even talking about it. Like, these are brothers that they like. Y'all prayed over me. The whole cabin prayed over me.
Yeah. I
You know
remember
that? Yeah, and it just was like, to be sitting on stage in whatever capacity, to pay you back, to pour back into what was poured into me is an honor and a privilege.
100%.
You know what I mean? So it was just a blessing for me to be up there.
Yeah, man.
So kind of going to like what this is about, man. Other reason why I brought you and to like who I listen to now. So it's crazy. I poured into you, but you now are coach for even my wife. Like she calls you coach. You know, you give her a game, give her a text message every single morning. She reads it. She's like, yeah, Dewane's my coach. And as a company, we refer to you when we talk about different hires and fires and different strategic decisions. But before all of that, there was just a boy, Mutunga. You know what I mean? You know, that was always interesting to me. It was two things that always stood out to me about you. You said you go to Africa every year. I was like, that's not normal, right? And you are not this polarizing alpha spirit. Like a lot of men that I'm around, they're like this braggadocious, like polarizing alpha spirit. You was always like just monotone. I present, I do me, and you're like an intellectual. So for me, it was like I never had a real friendship bond with a personality style like yours. So it was those two things. Last name Mutunga, obviously. You know, you're not from America. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, but you're American.
Yeah.
So it's just like, kind of explain, help us frame the boy.
Right.
Like, what was that experience like for you?
Man, so the boy, I grew up in the Bronx, born and raised, and probably until I left, you know, for college. You know, grew up New York City housing, you know, grew up in the projects from the 40, everybody. But I grew up in a home, you know, my parents were more seasoned parents. I was born to parents that are, you know, mid-30s, 40s. You know, the culture is very different. So, you know, my father's family, they're Cameroonian. And then you got New Jack City, New York City.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So there's this very defined structured way about how men are supposed to be, and we're not supposed to show emotion and this. But then outside is you got hip hop and everything is going on, and you know, drugs and bad. If you either play ball or
like Biggie said,
you know, no, it really was
crack
a real
rock
thing.
or you got a wicked jump shot.
That's how it was.
Yeah.
And again, I come from a big family. There's 10 of us. It's a blended family. It's 10 of us. I'm number 8 or 10. So again, I got my oldest sibling is about 15 years older than me, right? And so I always had this. Everybody in the home was older than me.
Right.
What most people don't know is that I actually had a speech impediment. So I didn't speak. I didn't really speak until I was about in the first grade, maybe like kindergarten, first grade. So when people see me speak, and I had this like,
you had a stutter, or you just had a delay? Like what type of speech?
So my stuttering was so bad that I couldn't get words out.
Right.
Wow. How long you?
And you're a public speaker now,
right?
Man,
but people would see me and Crump would laugh like it's like you having a conversation, like you so. But it comes from one. I'm in this environment. It's super busy. There's always a lot going on. I'm a little voice in this big environment, and I'm trying to calculate and find my pocket and my space. Right. I always felt different. I grew up in the street, but I never felt like I was a street dude like that. Like, you know, my nickname in the hood, they used to call me Smart Guy. You know what I'm saying? Like, yo, Smart Guy. And I always went to school. So whatever I got into outside of school, I always made sure I went to school. My mother was an educator, so it was really, really big for her that I went to school. You know, my brother, one of my older brothers got killed. Another one went to prison. So I was kind of like the golden child that like had to make it for my parents. And I don't really believe in pressure. So like I always just wore that responsibility, but I was always very observant and always sought to learn from people, whoever they were or whatever they look like. So that little kid grew up kind of really just trying to find his footing. I was very sure of myself.
Right.
Like I knew who I was. I think that's one of the benefits of, my culture. First of all, if you got my last name, we're related.
Right. Yeah.
And my grandfather and my father, there was this imparting of knowledge of self.
Okay.
So this is your lineage.
Okay.
Your people come from here. My people, the Bamum people of the Western Grasslands of Cameroon. Like I know their diet. I know, kind of the things that they do, even if I'm not there.
Okay.
So that when I go, and if I go back home, it's like I fit
right
in pocket. So I have an understanding and a knowledge of self, but that doesn't fit my environment where I'm at.
Yeah, for sure.
That way of life don't fit this Bronx right here.
For sure.
So I gotta kind of find my groove, and then I can't really speak and articulate myself or express myself. And so when you see me be very thoughtful and be very observant, that's where it comes from. Right, my mother.
So when you speak a lot about New York. So as a young kid, how much of teaching you your lineage and your ancestry route did you get a chance to directly experience that? Like when did the journey to Africa for you as a kid?
No, it wasn't until I was older. My mom wasn't on that. She was like,
okay. I was making sure I was clear. So
Yeah.
But they were still teaching you, like.
It wasn't until I was older. It wasn't until I was older, like maybe like a teenager.
That they started teaching you about your.
No, that I started to experience like going and traveling and stuff.
Okay, but what I'm asking.
No, but it was from birth. It was from birth.
Yeah.
It
sounds like it was like this push and pull. I would imagine it's a push and pull because you're being exposed to your origins and your culture at home. You're going to school. You know what you got to do at school, and then you got the street side of you. You know what I'm saying? As a middle schooler, as a young man, can you recall your thought process in terms of like the conundrums? Because you're like.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was very, very, because my brother, my older siblings were already teenagers. They was off the porch. My mother, my parents split when I was 3, and I probably would say that's the beginning of all of my plight as a man. Right? And I don't know if most people can think back to that, but when my parents split, that was the beginning of me starting to question myself.
Yeah.
Like,
but how young were you when you was conscious of it?
I was 3. And if you talk to my mother will tell you she noticed the difference.
Really?
She noticed the difference in me. The difference in me changed. Like my father not being in the environment.
Right.
I was a daddy's boy, so my mother would tell me like I wouldn't eat without my father. I wouldn't, you know what I mean? And like she would be crying sometimes. Like I done cooked for this boy. I done try to make him all the little foods that he like, and he's like, I'm waiting for my daddy to come home.
It's crazy.
You know what I mean? But he wasn't coming back to the crib. So now what?
So let's, like Chitty said, let's get into teenage. Like, what is happening that you are starting to strive or get some sense of direction? Because we're looking at this game right here,
right?
And you was a pro.
Yeah. So with chess, so I told you I had a speech impediment. So my father's family, they don't believe in like Western things like medicine and doctors, and don't be having nobody examining my boy. So like I had this speech, I wasn't speaking. I was intellectual. They see not my development, but I wasn't articulating myself. So, and my mother was like, I'm gonna take him to a speech pathologist and all that. My father was like, I don't want nobody touching him. He's fine.
Right.
I'm gonna teach him how to think and slow down. And he used chess as a way, in his mind, to kind of cure me of whatever they said was wrong.
So they'll put you in the chess. They'll put you in the chess.
I was playing chess with my father since I was 2 years old.
Wow.
So every time he came home from work, the board was there, and we would play. And you think about a 2-year-old. I'm fumbling around. I'm not paying attention, but my father was patient with me. Like, okay, this is the time that I have with him. Let me teach him. And what it was he taught me, if you know my mind, you know my father. If you know my heart, then you know my mother.
Okay.
Right? My father told me to be a thinking man and like be exact and precise. Be intentional and strategic. So that was his way of slowing me down. So I was playing chess for about 3 years. When I got about 5 years old, I was being skipped right? Because I was bright, but they were trying to hold me back because I wasn't speaking.
Talking.
Right.
My mother took me. She's an educator, so she took me to a speech pathologist, and I remember. It sounded like something out of a movie, but they had me like playing the piano, and they showing me like ink blotches, and then somebody's asking me questions,
Right.
and I'm doing all of this at the same time. And I remember walking out with her, and they were like, "Ma'am, there's nothing wrong with him. Your son is fine.
It's exceptional,
He's
actually.
just processing way more information than he's able to articulate."
Wow.
What? I knew some of that, but the one part I never knew was that your father was like, "You're not taking medicine. You're not getting intervention from the Western world. Sit down. I'm gonna get you to help process in your brain by playing a game of chess, and that is going to lead to you being to articulate your speech." Like that discerning of a father of their child, you can't. What is the cost of that? Like what would have been the? I'm trying to think. What would have been the ripple effect if your father wasn't there and nobody never let your father really engage you in a real way, and people throwing you on medicine and throwing you on this or constantly putting tension and stress, and you're constantly you're already processing a lot, you're already over analyzing,
Right.
and that's bottlenecking the articulation that's coming out, and people are doing more stimulation and more interventions and more making it worse. Because I know a couple of people with some boys who have speech impediments all the way into their teenager, but I'm thinking about both of them. Their father wasn't in their life.
Right.
And I think it's also really interesting that I'm thinking about it to point it out. Of my father and his siblings, my father would be the one that's considered Americanized. And I remember my grandfather always telling him, "Don't let these kids get Americanized. Like, don't." I remember like watching my grandfather talk to my father and being like, "I ain't never seen nobody talk to daddy like this, like this." You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But he was my grandfather would get on him about being too Americanized. And so I think my father having this duality with him, like being
And
the
you
one.
said the parents was a little old. At the
My parents
time
were older.
At the time they raised you,
So my
they
mother
had
might have
already
been
raised
like my mother
7 kids.
Yeah. So my father was about 37. My mother might have been like 35, 34.
When you was born.
When I was born. Right.
Yeah.
And I was a kid, honestly, I was a kid that wasn't supposed to be born.
Right.
I wasn't supposed to be born. My mother was like on birth control. She was not trying to have no more kids. They was done. And you know, a jazz concert, you know, with Luther Vandross, and you know what I'm saying? I'm here, but she always told me I was born at 25 weeks. I was a super preemie, and she told me that they delayed my birth as much as possible because if I was born any earlier, I wasn't going to make it. But if they delayed it anymore, she wasn't going to make it. So she was always like, "I don't care what you do, you're going to do something with yourself." You feel what I'm saying? Like, whatever it is, like, I've learned and I've bumped my head with the other kids and tried to figure out the parenting part, but you have to do something with yourself.
So, man, you're in high school, you're getting out of high school.
So,
how's the transition from what you're doing, what you've been through, your birth, your childhood, your chest, now you're in high school? Like, what is this transition into you figuring out who you want to be as a man? What does that look like for you?
I remember, so even before I got there, I was about 9 or 10. So my parents split at 3. When I was 9 or 10, my older brother gets killed by police. And then at that point, it clicked that kids can get hurt and kids can get killed. And like the world is not kind to children.
Yeah.
Like, and my brother was really the first person I felt protected by. Right? It's the first person I felt like covered me. He's my big brother. He was there the first time I had a fight. He was like, you know, when we in the crib and people trying to little bro me, he like, "Nah, you're not doing that." Like, he really held me down. And he was a teenager and he got killed by police. So you think about the framing of police and like, you know, they serve and protect. And in my mind as a kid, I'm like, they're supposed to serve and protect, but they just killed my brother. And I think at that point I got introduced to the coldness of the world, at least psychologically. And at that point I was like, well, there's nobody that can really protect me because the people that are supposed to protect me are not. My dad is not here presently, like physically in the crib with me anymore. You know, I would visit my dad on the weekends, stuff like that, but I'm having fights. I'm learning how to ride. I'm learning the world you know, through my older brothers or maybe like some old heads in the neighborhood, but that's when it clicked. You know, my father had means. So I had this sort of this reverse Fresh Prince experience where I'm in the hood when I'm with my mother and then I go visit my pops and like we in like a 5,000 square foot crib and it's different. So I was exposed to something different and it made me like want to strive for something more. So I, you know, my mother wanted more for me. She put me in a school. I'm the only black kid in the school. So now I'm dealing with being literally like, I'm like, if I breathe the wrong way, they're like, oh my God, he breathes.
Right, yeah.
And so I think, you know what I mean? Like, I think
then we all have a mental reference of a PWI experience.
you feel me?
Yeah.
So I always fell back on having that knowledge of self as a young kid from my father and my grandfather fortified me in those environments where I got, you know, white kids maybe like trying to pick with me or something like that, having to fight all the time, going to and from school. Like that was just a normal occurrence. And so very early I realized like, I don't want nobody trying me. Like I really be on some chill stuff. I don't want nobody trying me. So the moment I smell like you trying to play with me a certain type of way, I'm gonna assert myself.
Right.
We're gonna eliminate the threat immediately. But I'm still like, this is not the environment that's conducive to me. Because I'm going to see my pops and like they experiencing different stuff over here. So I'm realizing I'm almost like I have to buy time. Like I'm not about to leave my mom's. So I gotta be in this jungle of an environment till at least I graduate school. And then I can go choose the life that I wanted for myself.
When did you see that pivot? When did you experience that pivot from, all right, this is the trajectory I want to have. This because I work in a group home for young ladies. I just did a training in professional development the other day, and it talks about the adverse child experiences, the ACE study. So they say
Yep.
So you're
I'm familiar with ACE.
right?
Yep.
So you're familiar with ACE, and for all intents and purposes, you know, yourself, a lot of young men are checking a lot of those boxes. 1 to 8, they say 1 to 8, one out of every 3 kids experience at least one of the adverse child experiences. So you're talking about either poverty, violence in the community, separation or breakups from family members, and these components determine trauma and the effects of trauma on your body. If you know anything, trauma has the ability to change genetically your makeup and how your brain processes stuff.
Epigenetics, all that type of stuff.
Exactly. So for you as a young man, because for all intents and purposes, like I said, you're on a different trajectory. You're on a different path given your circumstances. And obviously, this is not a judgment of your circumstances.
Yeah, for sure.
It's more centered around
Sure.
there are people out there, there are viewers, there are young men like yourself who have had the exact same experience who do not understand even why they're experiencing what they're experiencing, the path that they're on. What would you say it gave you that turning point? That pivot
I think I had enough people that tried to, you know, insulate me from the experiences of the environment. I think, you know, even to this day in my neighborhood, I'm like one of the ones, you know what I'm saying? Like, so, you know, from some of my brother's my older brother's friends, like there were certain people that was like, whatever we do,
you gonna make it.
We can't let certain things penetrate and get to him.
Right, yeah.
And so I saw the intent.
Okay.
And I was trying to figure out like, okay,
that's that village.
Like why me?
Yeah.
But there were certain things that they couldn't quite save me from just because of virtue of proximity to the environment.
Right.
And you can't be with a kid 24/7.
No, right.
And you know, just the dysfunction of certain things happening in the crib and in the environment, you can't save me from that. So now, you know, I will say I did come from a lot of love and a lot of structure. My mother did not play that shit.
Right.
I'm sorry, I don't know.
No,
my mother didn't play that shit. So it was we were like community police. You know, my mother was very much into like the Panther movement and things like that. My mother emancipated herself at like 15 or 16. And she was on some like, listen, I gotta work. And y'all have to take care of each other.
Yeah.
So it's 5 days in a week. We're gonna have cook day for everybody. We're gonna have a clean day for everybody. Right. And one person does something, y'all all gonna get y'all ass whooped.
Right.
because we all know the rules here.
Right.
So why are you letting him do something
Right. Mutual
that we
accountability.
know that right? And so she built us to be super tight with each other because I could walk out this door and I might not come back. Y'all got to be able to fend for each other.
Right.
So how do you, let's transition.
Yeah,
How do you take that into your manhood? You know, we talked about offline, you know, you battling in your 20s, identity. You was on Wall Street.
Yeah, worked on Wall Street for about 10 years.
And so you got Wall Street, you made it out the hood, you got the wife and kids, and you're lost, you're confused, you're hurting, you're burning out of, like, talk about.
Yeah, because you're the one. So when you're the one, that means you've eclipsed everybody. Yeah. So who's around you that could really teach you what to do for the next phase? So it's like I made it, for all intents and purposes, the escape velocity that I used to get out of the atmosphere and get out of that environment was cool. And then I realized, I'm in space now. And what do I do? There's nobody that can save me. And I think at the same time, in parallel process, I'm trying as a man now. Yeah. My father has groomed me and raised me to be this version of a man. Like he left these shoes for me to fill, but those shoes didn't fit me. Yeah. That wasn't my version of manhood. So I was dealing with this juxtaposition of like being, like having respect and reverence for my culture, but like also being authentically myself. Sure. And, just going about life in a way where it's like, I'm not disrespecting or dismissing the sacrifices of my family and the things that people did, but I'm doing things that nobody understands.
So you're going through this, nobody understands, and then let's call it what it is. I know you as my brother. You gave me some insight. You crash and burn, you end up in a divorce. Nothing that you...
Yeah.
But what you shared with me, you helped me as a man to be even more empathetic to somebody. You talked about what that divorce experience was for you. You always talk about, man, I wish that on nobody. Can you just kind of go into our little conversation a little bit just about that process and coming out of it? Right. Like going in and coming out of it and all that you had to process in it. Like, can you talk about that?
Yeah. So, we met as teenagers, right? We go, I got skipped, so I got into college a little bit early. Met at college. So you really, again, you think you've grown, but you're not grown. Yeah. And it's this process of growing individually, but then having to grow together and wearing these multiple hats. And again, I just wasn't around. Like, don't get me wrong, I had people that really cared about me. I had old heads that was giving me the game, but they wasn't living the life that I wanted to live. Right. So I'm like, yeah, you might be telling me move this and move that, but you got a little side piece. I ain't moving like that. You know what I'm saying? Or so their intentions were good, but they wasn't giving me the game. Right. The game that I needed for my path. Yeah. And so I found myself just stuck. Like, I'm hungry, I'm desperate to be my absolute best self. I'm hungry and I'm desperate to be better, but it still feels like I'm coming up short, right? And I don't have the perspective of years later being able to reflect in hindsight. Right. And so, she's in the, for all intents and purposes, like very like soft, and she's like not built for the tough terrain. Right. And I'm a gladiator, so I'm like, whatever I got to do. Smoke. Right? So what I didn't realize was I'm going to get us across the finish line. And this is where, like, the assessment and stuff was beautiful for me on a back end. I'm the type of person, I'm going to run through a wall, do whatever I need to do to make it happen. But I don't necessarily take account for the emotional wear and tear that wears on people. Right? And there's collateral damage to that, right? And so just the kind of struggles of figuring yourself out, and making it, whatever that looks like. And she's just like, I just want to be in a bubble, and like the guy that I met when we was here, and I'm like, I'm not that guy no more. And I don't think you should be that girl anymore. Right. Like we got to grow and evolve, but how do you grow and evolve but still stay hinged together? Yeah. And so, like anybody that's young or just trying to find your way, then you married, you got children. You got family pressures and all of these different things, and the grass starts looking greener over there.
I know what that's like.
Right? And the pressures, and me, I'm trying to cover the crib. Like, I'm not trying to let nothing penetrate this. Right. But I realized we starting to bust the seams here, and the seams are busting. And now I'm starting to get more tight.
Yeah.
And the more tight I get with certain things, the more I lock in as a man on certain things, it just makes it worse. It starts to unravel even more. And then ultimately it gets to the point where it's like, and I tell people like, I'm a loyal person just by nature. I'm very, very much a ride or die kind of person. But getting a divorce for me, when I realized I got to the point where I was going to die if I didn't separate myself. If I didn't remove myself from the toxicity in that environment, I was going to die. When you put me in a situation where it's self-preservation,
it ain't gonna be nobody else.
Well, I have to.
Yeah.
If for no other reason, I have children that are responsible for me.
Yeah.
So now my children are growing up seeing certain things. And I will never forget, my daughter took me, my daughter took me one day and she was like, let's do a daddy-daughter like outing, whatever. You can take me shopping and, we can buy me some clothes, right, daddy? So good. So we going, and this is the point she's getting a little bit older, so she's more sensitive about her body. So she's like, I'm gonna go change in the dressing room. And I'll never forget, she took me in the dressing room, like, come on, daddy. And in my mind, I was like, this is a little strange because how she changing her clothes that fast?
Right.
And she pulled me in the dressing room and she was like, daddy, why don't you smile anymore? And I was like, what you mean, baby? She's like, why you don't smile anymore? She said, the only time you smile is when you brush your teeth. And that doesn't count.
Right. Jeez.
And I was like, well, how does that make you feel? She's like, it makes me sad because I want you to be happy. And at that point, I was like, I'm letting this stuff, like, I'm trying to be my best, but this is not a situation that I have the capacity to manage. So I have to seek that. And I think getting to the line and seeing like, okay, there's other people who are trying to walk the same path that I'm walking in the way that I'm walking it. And they're having challenges and they've went through stuff and got on the other side of it. So that's when I'm getting the game. But by that point, it was fractured too much for me to fix. For me to fix. And then if I'm being real, I'm on the line and I'm hearing all these brothers like, hey, as a man, this is what you got to do. And you got to hold on and you can't do this and you can't. Right? And I'm like, in my spirit, I know this. It's not supposed to feel like this.
I get it, bro.
I didn't sign up for this, and it's not supposed to feel like this. And I'm finding myself not being myself, and I'm acting out like it just I'm feel like I'm spiraling.
Right, just to pacify that situation.
Yeah, just to feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to do as a man, based on the manhood that was given to me. From my father, and it's about duty. It ain't about your feelings.
Right.
Yeah, it's a tight that space when you get in it is such a traumatic space. I think we don't speak enough of the manhood trauma of not abandoning your post, but honoring your relationship, but dismissing your humanity, and that conundrum that you fight with that. And again, I think it goes back to a previous podcast we was talking about addressing or seeing conflict and confrontation, because I think the man that you are now, having been through it, you're on the other side. You are in healthy relationships. You are in healthy relationships with your children. When you reached out to me about something your daughter was going through, right?
Yeah.
The man you are today,
yeah.
Let's put that man, the same exact man, with the same exact situation, with whoever that woman is 10 years ago.
Very different scenario. I didn't have the information.
So this is my hard thing to say to people. People are people. It's when a mature masculine man shows up who has information and communication. So like, for example, somebody say, man, your kids, my kids. When I get in a room, all kids behave a certain way. When I get in a room, all men behave a certain way. When I get in a room, all women switch up their energy. Because I demand that with my presence. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
So it's like the struggle I have in this space is that I know this is hella painful, and it's hard to hear, but there's a greater version of you that this situation is actually trying to birth. And it's weird
Listen,
because it doesn't feel good and you don't know it. So it's hard for you to really have faith of the unknown. But I'm telling you, as a walking testimony, that ratchet Negro that's from Ocklawaha cannot solve this current problem. The godly man of God that's in me also, who I just haven't spent enough time with, he can solve this.
Yeah.
But he has to sacrifice, surrender, and submit in a way willingly in his spirit and heart that his mind can connect to, that allows transformation, growth, and fertile ground to just live here. And things start to sprout up from it that never was there before. That's what, because my marriage had dead moments.
yeah.
It had lifeless moments. Like it wasn't like the whole time it was peaches and cream. Like it had, and I couldn't, but I said, I have to stay true to what I know, even if I don't know it. And I have to wait until I figure it out. And I wouldn't wish that pain on nobody. I wouldn't even start to break down what I went through. Because it would have to be like FBI would have to come and say, Chris, listen, are you about to take, because we're gonna have, that's like what you was sharing on the, like oh Chiz, you about to go there?
Yeah.
But if we can take full ownership as men and step back and you say, you know what? When I really look back and examine my behavior throughout the process of it, the man I am now, if that was the man that was showing up from Jump Street, things would have never
100%
led their way.
And this is the part about environment that's so important.
Yeah.
When I say that I would not be the man that I am without y'all, I mean that.
Yeah.
Right? I said it yesterday. Awareness breeds choice. You cannot choose something that you are not aware of. I didn't have access. It was in me. It was there. And I knew it was, I felt it in my spirit. I didn't know how to access it. Right? So just because I give you a tool doesn't mean you know how to use it. You have to wield that tool and you have to be given instruction. Right? If I give you a key, but I don't tell you what door it goes to, you're gonna be going through you're trying to fidget in every lock before you get there.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until I got in an environment with brothers who were living it parallel me and brothers who had been there already that they were able to say, oh, I see exactly where you are in your process. Let me give you the blueprint. Let me pull you to the side. But I didn't have it. I had all of the willingness. I was digging into all the books and getting around and doing all of this. But I wasn't associated. I wasn't attached to the right environment that showed me, right, that cut my learning curve. Because I say now, if I had the information right now, that situation doesn't happen that way.
Bro, that resonates 100% with me. That's the struggle that I'm in right now. Because of the resources and the space that I'm in now with the line and the brothers that I'm in now.
But you got to give some grace there.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was telling another brother that in the circle, I was like, yo, he was expressing, the challenges he's having with his wife and the stuff that has done in the past and the person he's trying to be, and his wife still has she remembers the man he used to be, and he's struggling with his new identity. She's struggling with his new identity because, she still holds on to some of that stuff from the past. And as much as he's got other resources and he's refined and he's a different man now, there's still, these things still manifest and still come out in the relationship. That's kind of where I am. So I'm like, man, if I knew what I knew now, the trajectory would be very different. So I'm torn. So I'm like, now I'm just like, do I reinsert myself in a situation that I thought I had closed the door on, but I really didn't give it its full strength? Like you say, you have the resources, but you necessarily don't know how to use those tools. And now being in a space where I'm starting to learn how to use those tools, do I now try?
Yeah, I think it depends. I think it depends on the situation. Yeah. You know what I mean? I think in my situation, like if I'm being 100, me knowing what I know now, I don't make the same choice.
Yeah.
I don't, and I think that's the thing that we got to talk about as men too, like the choices that we make. I don't make that choice the same way, right? Because
and just to make sure we're crystal clear which choice you're talking about.
Choice in the choice in the partner.
Yeah,
right.
I wanted to say. The
Oh
whole
yeah. Like you don't make the same choice in a partner because I think as men, well, I'll speak for myself. For me, I was competing with my father for a long time,
right?
Because I didn't feel embraced. So I'm like, I want to be better. Everything he did, I'm gonna do it this way, right? And in certain instances, I was choosing things because it chose me, not because it was my choice.
I get
if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes 100% sense.
And it gives better understanding to the conversation and the conflict that we have one with another in our interrelations. Because I chose Nicole strictly off no emotion. She checked off the box. She was a wife. I was like, yep, you're nurturing, you're considerate, you're sensitive, you're focused, you're dedicated, you're loyal, you love God. So you're a wife. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The question is, am I ready? While other brothers like, man, she
yeah,
woo, boy,
right.
I'm married, huh?
That's a little boy.
I was like,
but think about
how
many dudes get with a chick because she giving you some type of energy. So you like, oh, I'm about to see, right. So it's like
she's funny and we have a good time together.
She's beautiful. That was me.
And so I didn't realize until we grown men. I didn't realize everybody. I was like, let me see if you hang around the basketball team. Let me see if you thotty and dotty and asking for attention when I'm not. Let me see if you thirst trap. I was.
Let me see how you are.
I was constantly
when I'm not up and I'm going through something.
Yeah, and I got no bread. So I was doing all that from Jump Street, and I didn't realize. So in my mind, every dude was doing that. Every dude wasn't like, I'm not even consider you until you go through the rap sheet first. Now, guys like, yeah, man, we kind of was going through a thing, and bro, she used to. Man, I was like, you know what? Probably be the best thing to do. Or something like we just had a baby, and I just felt like I wanted to make it right.
You just fell into a situation.
I'm like, bro, you decided to get married off of that. And I was like, oh, so everybody's not processing because I'm competing with my dad. I had a baby. I felt pressure from my parents. You can't shack up. I didn't want to shack up, and I just one of my other cousins like, man, she kept seeing me while I was in jail, and I get off the energy of she was loyal to me seeing me in jail, and I became a Christian in jail. So when I got out, it's like you can't shack up, but I want to have sex. So I was like, to make my sex a good with God, I got married. And I'm listen, that is not the checklist.
Yeah. But you don't realize, right?
You don't know what you don't know.
So here's the thing: when we were at Nation Builders, right, that first time, and we went to eat for lunch. John brought me, because I don't know if you remember, there was like a little buffet joint, and it was seating down there. And I remember Quest was saying he was talking to me, and the first time I ever heard this, he was like, "Did you follow the order of operations?" And I was like, what?
Not Bodmas or Patmos.
I'm like, what? I'm like, what you talking about? He's like, did you consult with God before you made that decision? Yeah. I was like, and I started, to get. I'm like, bro, first of all, watch what you saying, Right. But I left that conversation like, oh no, there's a process, there's an order of operations. You consult with God before you make decisions. There's you seek counsel. You go through, and I was just making decisions because I knew what I wasn't doing. I knew what I wasn't standing for. I knew what I wasn't gonna become. Mm-hmm. And the one thing I was focused on, I was not going to let my family fail. I wasn't going to relive or recreate something that I deemed dysfunctional. Right. And by having these blinders off and having tunnel vision, right, you end up engineering a situation that didn't have to exist. Right? Had you sought counsel, and you think you've grown, but you really not.
So talk about kingship now. Let's land the plane here that as kings, as we're growing to develop this, evolve, like what does kingship look like to you right now?
Kingship means service. Period. It means being of service to the people that are in my space, in my spheres of influence, in my environment. I work for them. Right, I have a duty to create the structure, create the environment, create the culture that allows people to grow, develop, and thrive.
Wow. That's it, man. Give it up for my man, Dewane Mutunga, man. The Boy Band Team Podcast. Appreciate you guys. Until next time. Thank you, bro. We out.